And guess what? Turns out, yes, even chicken is bad for you. I know, like when I found that out, I was like, what? I thought that was the good one. All right, what's up everybody? I'm Danesh and welcome to my channel, That Vocal Vegan, where I talk about veganism and I sing covers with my ukulele. This is one of the videos I've been really excited to make because finding out the health implications of eating animals was what initially got me started on eating a plant-based diet. Also, a bit of a disclaimer, I am not a medical professional. I'm just some guy on YouTube, or given the people who watch my videos, you probably know me, so yeah, it's just me. And you may be thinking, dude, of course you're showing these studies. You're like a biased vegan. But I want to remind you that I was a biased meat eater when I first stumbled upon these studies, and I promise you, I did not want to know that eating meat was this bad for you. Also, the point of this video isn't to be this all-encompassing dissertation about the impacts of a plant-based diet on our health. The goal of this video is to present a set of evidence that I hadn't seen until 2.5 years ago. Also, as you can tell, this video is really long, but I thought the information was really worth putting together in just one video. So seriously, slap it on 2x speed or something. Also, I encourage you to question what I'm going to be talking about in this video, and I hope it encourages you to do your own research and inform yourself on the complete case of the health benefits of a plant-based diet. And honestly, I too used to throw my hands up in the air and say, oh, it's so much contradictory information. We just don't know enough about it. Nutrition is so ambiguous. But honestly, once I really looked into it and all the different angles, and I read the arguments and the counter arguments and the counters to the counter arguments, I was wholly convinced that a plant-based diet would severely reduce my risk of dying from some of our biggest killers. Something that was shocking to me was the blanket phrase, meat is bad for you, does not really do justice to the scale of what the research out there suggests. There's a far-reaching impact to how eating our cuddly friends impacts our health and impacts our day-to-day lives. So I hope you'll set aside your disbelief momentarily. Trust me, I know where it's coming from, and you'll approach this video with an open mind. And you might be thinking, dude, if it's as bad as you say, like, why aren't the doctors talking about it? You know, why have I never heard this before? And truthfully, according to the study, doctors in the US barely get any nutritional training. Doctors know about diseases and treating them, but when it comes to nutrition, they don't receive the training we might think they do. And any knowledge they do acquire is more on their own accord. Any doctor or med school friends watching this in between your rotations? I don't even know if that's the right terminology. I'm just pretending to know what I'm talking about. But comment below if that has or hasn't been your experience. Again, I'm not trying to talk badly about doctors. They are qualified professionals in what they study, but I didn't like how this part turned out, so I'm doing a voiceover. What I meant to say was, this wouldn't be the first time that doctors have unknowingly promoted something that we know today is harmful. All right, so now that that's out of the way, I want to make a few comments before getting into the heart of the video. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which is the largest organization of food and nutrition professionals, have categorically stated that a vegan diet is healthy for all stages of life. That includes pregnancy, lactation, teenagers, kids. Second, there are plenty of athletes and Olympians who are thriving on a plant-based diet. When it comes to protein, this study says that as long as you're getting the same quantity of protein, it doesn't matter if it's from plant or animal sources. And three, to quote Dr. Campbell from the China study, absolute proof in the technical sense is unattainable and unimportant, but common sense proof is attainable and critical. For example, it was through this process of interpreting research that we formed our beliefs regarding smoking and health. Smoking has never been 100% proven to cause lung cancer, but the odds that smoking is unrelated to lung cancer are so astronomically low that the matter has long since been considered settled. All right, so I'm going to split this video into 3 parts. So the first part, I'm going to cover studies that suggest animal products are harmful for us. The second part is research that suggests plant foods are good for us. And the third is going to be me presenting the research that I found showing animal products are good for us. That way we can look at the discussion from multiple angles. And I don't know, do you think that would add credibility? I'm just trying to think about how I would have been more receptive to all this before I went vegan. You see what I'm saying? All right, so starting off, animal products are bad for you. So I think everyone already agrees that red meat and processed meat cause cancer. Here's a study anyways, you know, just to cover all my bases. But where it gets a little bit more interesting is when we start looking into other research and how we see other animal products affect us in other ways. All right, so first off, let's talk heart disease, the #1 killer in the USA. At least my understanding was that heart disease was something that just kind of happened. You got as you aged, you know, something inevitable in life. But it actually turns out that's not necessarily the case. In the China study, and yes, that's what it's informally called, researchers found that in the Guizhou region of China, and please forgive my pronunciation there, they were not able to find any deaths for anyone due to coronary heart disease under the age of 65. Also, in another study, they found that heart disease in Uganda during that time period of the study was almost non-existent. And so something that these populations have in common was that they both ate predominantly plant-based diets and they both had very, very low cholesterol. And I know what you're thinking, oh, Dinesh, but there are so many other things it could have been. All right. I hear where you're coming from. Just keep these studies in the back of your head for now. Moving on to another topic, LDL. So whenever you hear the term bad cholesterol, they're referring to LDL. According to this study, the lower LDL you have, the less likely you are to have a heart attack. So the optimal levels are from 50 to 70, which is generally what populations that don't have heart disease are at. It's what we're born at, and it's generally the level at which we see progression of atherosclerosis stop. I swear I had to practice that word like 5 times. Progression of atherosclerosis. And it's generally the level at which we see atherosclerosis. That's a tough one. And also, according to this study, consumption of trans fat, cholesterol, and saturated fat all increase LDL, all of which are found primarily in animal products. But okay, moving on to another animal product, eggs. Those also aren't good for us. So in this study conducted on almost 30,000 adults in the US over a period of 17 and a half years, they found that 300 milligrams of dietary cholesterol a day was significantly associated with 17% higher risk of cardiovascular disease and an 18% higher risk of all-cause mortality. And for every additional half egg a day, they saw a 6% higher risk of cardiovascular disease and an 8% increased risk of all-cause mortality. And this study was able to show that it was the cholesterol in the eggs and not other factors that was causing the negative health outcomes. And guess what? Turns out, yes, even chicken is bad for you. I know, like when I found that out, I was like, what? I thought that was the good one. But not according to this study. Eating chickens is just as bad for cholesterol that we know now is bad for us as eating red meat. This study even goes as far to say that the findings are in keeping with recommendations promoting diets with a high proportion of plant-based food, but based on a lipid and lipoprotein effects, do not provide evidence for choosing white over red meat for reducing cardiovascular disease risk. Which is crazy, right? People are always like, oh, eat chickens, like that'll be better for your health. But then here's another study that says eating chickens increases the rate of blood cancers. And what's curious is that this study found that red meat and processed meat did not show an increase for blood cancer. So a blanket statement of, oh, eating chickens is better for you in every way does not seem to be supported by this study. But don't worry, fish is good for you, right? Like pescatarians, Mediterranean diet. Sorry, not according to this study. Just one serving a week of white meat, which included fish and poultry, tripled the risk of colon cancer. And that's even more than for red meat, where red meat only doubled the risk. And I didn't even look at all of the research on fish and toxins and all the heavy metals in that, but that's like a whole other topic. And then here's another more catch-all study that says eggs, beef, pork, and fish are the major sources of carnitine and choline that are converted by the gut microbiota to trimethylamine, then oxidized in the liver and released into circulation as TMAO, which the study also says TMA is linked to risk of atherosclerosis, nailed it, and cardiovascular disorders. All right, and I know what a lot of y'all are thinking in the back of your minds because you've said it to me in person. Yeah, it's because of all the hormones and chemicals they add in the US. That's what the issue is. That's what makes this all so bad for you. According to this study, organic meat is just as cancerous, and even in the case of lamb meat, even more cancerous than non-organic meat. And to be fair, I don't know if that includes like grass-fed beef. I looked for research trying to find information on grass-fed beef, but I couldn't find anything. If we're to believe the previous studies and how it's all about the actual components of the animals, like the fat that's in them, then I don't see why what they eat would change that. But then again, I'm not a medical professional. This is just me. That's just what I thought. And don't think I'd leave dairy out of this. So from this study that followed over 50,000 women in North America for almost 8 years, the lead author said, consuming as little as a fourth to a third cup of dairy milk per day was associated with an increased risk of breast cancer of 30%. And by drinking up to 1 cup per day, the associated risk went up to 50%. And for those drinking 2 to 3 cups per day, the risk increased to 70 to 80%. And I know I'm all upbeat, but getting a little bit personal here, breast cancer is a huge thing in my family and has claimed lives in my family. And knowing this kind of information does upset me and does make me feel angry. Like, if this is true, why is this not even talked about? Like, does anybody remember this? All right, but anyways, I know you guys are thinking again, yeah, Danash, the issue is that we eat excessive amounts of meat, but moderation is key. No. Let's take a look at this really famous study called the Adventist Health Study. So my understanding of this study is that it's a study of the Seventh-day Adventists across North America. They've been considered really great to study from a nutritional perspective because as a cohort, they're already split up into different dietary patterns of eating, from omnivores all the way to vegans, and so we've been able to get valuable insights from them. So in this study, what they found is as both the amount of animal products they ate and the frequency of animal products they ate went down, so did their risk of diabetes and high blood pressure. And the part that stuck out to me was even people eating animals animals only on a weekly basis were not as protected as vegans. And here's another study from Taiwan where they compared Buddhist vegetarians to Buddhist non-vegetarians. However, in this case, the non-vegetarians were still eating primarily plant-based, just around 1 to a few servings of meat a week, which is about 5% of the US intake of meat. And both groups were eating pretty healthy, no soda or anything. And even when they controlled for different factors like weight and exercise, they found that vegetarian men had half the rate of diabetes as non-vegetarian men, and vegetarian women had a fourth of the rate of diabetes as non-vegetarian women. And they didn't find any cases of diabetes in the people who were strictly eating vegan diets. All right, so that about covers the first part. How we doing on time? And by the way, I figured I'd use this as a chance to say, if you're finding the content of this video helpful, please consider giving it a like and a subscribe, as it would make a huge difference to a small little channel like mine. All right, and so the second part of this video is going to be why plant-based diets are protected. By the way, in these studies, if you see the term vegan or plant-based, as a rule of thumb, you can assume that they're talking about a diet centered around whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, fruits, veggies. Yeah, unfortunately, gorging yourself in French fries and Oreos will not yield the same health benefits. All right, so this next one's one of my favorite studies, finding that legumes were the most important dietary predictor of survival in older people of different ethnicities, stating that the legume food group showed a 7 to 8% reduction in mortality hazard ratio for every 20 grams increase in daily intake. And as a reminder, your legumes are your lentils, chickpeas, beans. From this study of around 12,000 participants over nearly a 30-year period, they found that plant-based diets reduced the risk of cardiovascular disease by 16%, cardiovascular death by 32%, and risk of any cause of death by 18 to 25%. And no benefit was found for the consumption of fish and low-fat dairy, by the way. Okay, and this next is one of the most famous plant-based studies ever done. It's worth looking into just on its own, but essentially approximately 200 people, all with some kind of heart issue, showed up, and they were all prescribed a whole food plant-based diet, free of dairy, fish, meat, and any added oil. 89% of those people stuck with the diet, and out of those people, there was only one major cardiac event. That's a 0.6% incidence rate. In many cases, they found that the diet even reversed their heart disease. Again, not a professional here, but I don't think even modern medicine has been able to achieve that. Out of the other 11% of people who were not adherent to the diet, they had a 62% incidence rate of a major cardiac event. So eating that way, they were almost able to eliminate heart disease, the #1 killer in the USA. Remember earlier when I was talking about those populations in Uganda and China? Doesn't that seem a little bit more plausible now that it was because of their diet? And doesn't this also make anybody else angry? So much pain and suffering in this world is caused by heart disease. I have people close to me who have been severely impacted by heart disease. This is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this topic in general. How many people would change their behavior if this was more common knowledge? It's literally life-saving, and many people don't even know this option exists. But anyways, turning it down a notch. From this Harvard meta-analysis, a whole food plant-based diet was linked with 23% lower rates of type 2 diabetes. This study of around 70,000 Japanese people over a mean time frame of 18 years found that a substitution of just 3% energy from plant protein for red meat protein was associated with 34% lower total mortality, 39% lower cancer-related mortality, and 42% lower cardiovascular disease-related mortality. Now let's talk about the protective properties of soy. But I thought soy caused No. Not according to these two studies. Soy not only decreases the chance of getting breast cancer, but it also makes you more likely to survive breast cancer if you do get it. And again, as someone who has breast cancer in their family, like, how is this not more well known? And remember how I was talking about how a plant-based diet has far-reaching impacts? There's even implications on brain diseases and Alzheimer's. Another Adventist Health Study preliminary findings suggest that meat eaters were twice as likely as non-meat eating groups to get dementia. And as Dr. Neil Bernard says, just as saturated fat and cholesterol can build up in the blood vessels and form plaques, plaques in the brain compromise blood flow to important parts of the brain. And another huge thing, fiber. People always ask vegans where they get their protein from. We should all be more concerned about fiber, which you get a ton of in a whole food plant-based diet. Cis ladies, don't worry, I'm thinking about you. According to this study, every 20 grams of dietary fiber is associated with 15% less breast cancer risk. All right, and this last study is actually crazy. It's about Beyond Meat. So you know how everyone's like, ugh, those processed plant meats, they're so bad for you. Ultra processed. Well, in this study, they actually took a group of people, gave half of them regular meat and half of them Beyond products, and then halfway through they switched their diets, and they found quote, the plant products improved several cardiovascular disease risk factors, including TMAO. There were no adverse effects on risk factors from the plant products. So yes, Beyond Meat is healthier than regular animal body parts. Does anyone else think that's crazy? I thought that's crazy, and I'm vegan. All right, so part 3 of the video. Animal products are good for you. All right, so when I was looking for research or information on the positive impacts of eating animal products on our health, I was generally looking for more scientific papers like the ones I've just covered, which show a decrease in certain diseases or, increased lifespan or stuff like that. And so basically all the results I found fell into 3 different buckets. So the first bucket was just articles saying stuff like, oh, eating meat is good for you because it contains like protein and iron, but they weren't scientific and they never mentioned anything about health outcomes. And as we know, we can get all these nutrients from plants. That's like saying drink Coca-Cola, it'll keep you hydrated because it's got water. Yeah, but at what cost? But those actually were the majority of the results I found. But the second bucket of results I found were studies that said that eating animal products was neutral or that it didn't really have an impact on health or any of these bad things that eating animal products were being blamed for. However, I noticed that a lot of these studies had industry funding behind them. Now, I'm not saying that they're lying or that they're making up results, but when that happens, I'm saying you should probably take a closer look at the study. And this applies for everything too, right? If you see a plant-based study that's, big broccoli is supporting, and yeah, totally, like I agree, like let's take a closer look at that study. According to this study, 49% of the industry-funded intervention studies reported conclusions that were discordant with study results, compared with 13% of non-industry funded studies. And so the example they give is where essentially they give college students some eggs and they measure their cholesterol levels, and they ended up seeing an increase in cholesterol, but not enough to achieve statistical significance, which means that there wasn't enough data to rule out that that just happened by chance. Instead of saying that, however, the egg industry just published, yeah, eggs they don't raise cholesterol. See what I mean? Isn't that kind of sus? You hear that, Gen Z? But the third bucket was research that did say eating animal products is good for you. So here's a study that said eating meat was associated with longer life expectancy. Now, I was a bit curious given that all the studies we just looked at kind of said the exact opposite and gave reasons for why that may be. Like I mentioned many times, I'm not a medical professional, but this medical professional did write a rebuttal. Quote, they found that countries with a greater meat intake also have a greater life expectancy and decided the two were related. Interestingly, beer and wine came out relatively near the top among some of the high meat consuming countries too. So essentially they were saying that the more developed countries have longer life expectancies and they also happen to consume more things like meat, wine, and beer. And for that reason, it's not necessarily the eating the animals that was causing the higher life expectancy. And I posted a link to the entire rebuttal in the description if you want to take a look at it. Again, like I said, they're not lying. These are published studies. But when it goes so against everything that we've seen before, it is worth taking a closer look. Here's another study that says milk consumption does more good than harm for human health in this umbrella review. While also in that same study, they say it increases the risk of Parkinson's disease and prostate cancer. Why would you choose that option? We can get the same, if not better, protection from plant foods, and we can get cancer protecting properties from other plant milks. All right, so to wrap this up, I want to re-emphasize that this isn't a rigorous analysis of all of the research out there surrounding plant-based diets, especially on the effects of plant-based diets. There's so much research out there, it was shocking. I had no idea what to include and what not to include in this video. I wanted to present all this evidence to show there's science that shows all of the different animal products affect all parts of our bodies, and it's a lot more than you probably think it is. And I can already hear some of y'all saying, oh, Danish, but you cherry-picked some of the studies. Danish, why didn't you scrutinize those plant-based studies as much as those meat-based studies? And that's why I invite you to take a look at the research yourself and come to your own conclusions. Give an honest chance and hear out the whole scientific argument for the advantages of a plant-based diet. See what the qualified professionals are saying. Read some books like How Not to Die and the China Study. Watch some documentaries like The Game Changers and Forks Over Knives. And then use your own judgment to make an informed decision about your health. And like I said at the start, after doing that, not only was I convinced to switch my diet to a plant-based diet, but I was so convinced that I think it's criminal that this isn't common knowledge that's out there, and I want to spread the science about it. All right, so thanks so much for watching this video. If at any point in the future you do decide to eat more plant-based, then check out my video on tips for going vegan, and also check out my video for what I eat in a day as a vegan. Everything I've talked about, all the sources, all the science, all the books, all the movies I've talked about, all the documentaries are all linked in the description. I did want to make a note that I found a lot of these studies in the books How Not to Die and the China Study from the website plantbasedprofessionals.com, from vegan activist Mike the Vegan, and from my own Googling. All right, cool. I hope to see y'all all in the next one. See ya.